What happens when the Black Bulls, the most unpredictable squad in the Clover Kingdom, are suddenly thrown into the world of Tensura? Asta, Yami, Noelle, and the rest of the squad find themselves in the Great Forest of Jura, face to face with Rimuru Tempest and his powerful monster army. But with Asta's mysterious anti-magic, Yami's devastating dark magic, and the incredible powers of the Black Bulls, Rimuru quickly realizes these newcomers are unlike any other otherworlders he has encountered. Will they become enemies? Or could the Black Bulls become some of Rimuru's most powerful allies? Let's find out what happens when chaos meets the ultimate monster nation. The Great Forest of Jura was a place of burgeoning order, a green cathedral where a slime had begun to rewrite the laws of coexistence for monsters and men alike. Under the watchful eye of Rimuru Tempest, the forest had seen many wonders: the birth of a nation, the evolution of goblins into formidable warriors, and the rise of the Kijin. But it had never seen anything quite as loud, chaotic, or structurally impossible as the Black Bull's hideout. The arrival was not a whisper, but a violent scream of reality being torn asunder. One moment, the space above a clearing near the outskirts of the Jura-Tempest Federation was empty. The next, a massive, shifting castle made of mismatched stone, wood, and iron lunged into existence. It roared with the sound of grinding gears and groaning timber, a bull-shaped monstrosity that slammed into the earth with enough force to send a shockwave through the ancient trees, shattering trunks like toothpicks. Inside the shifting walls, the Black Bulls were in their natural state, complete and utter disarray. Yami Sukehiro, the captain of the Magic Knight's most notorious squad, was currently on the toilet, gripped by a sudden and violent bout of spatial displacement that nearly sent his cigarette down the drain. Asta, the boy born without a drop of mana, was mid-swing in his 10,000th vertical strike, his Demon Slayer sword vibrating with a strange, dark energy that didn't belong to the world he had just left. The rest of the squad, Noelle, Magna, Luck, and the others, were scattered through the halls of Henry Legoland's magical house, nursing the metaphysical equivalent of a hangover from their trip through the rift. Outside, the forest did not remain silent for long. Within seconds of the castle's arrival, the shadows beneath the surrounding trees began to lengthen and twist. Sue, the blue-haired Kijin, and Rimuru's primary intelligence officer, materialized 50 feet from the front gate. His eyes, cold and calculating, took in the massive structure. It didn't feel like any magic he had ever encountered. There was no trace of the elemental spirits, or the typical flow of magicules that govern this world's physics. Instead, there was a raw, chaotic pressure emanating from the castle, and at its center, a terrifying void, where there should have been a soul. "Report!" a voice echoed in Sue's mind. It was Rimuru, communicating via thought transmission from the capital. "I felt a massive energy spike. Is it the orcs? Or maybe an invasion from the Eastern Empire?" "Neither. Rimuru-sama," Sue replied, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "A fortress has appeared. It is organic in its movement, and there are people inside. Many of them possess strange energy signatures, but one among them, he feels like a hole in the world. My perception skills are failing to lock onto him entirely. It is as if he doesn't exist." Back inside the castle, Yami kicked open the door to the common room, his cape billowing despite the lack of wind. He looked at his squad, most of whom were still picking themselves up off the floor. "All right, listen up, you idiots," he growled, his voice a low rumble that instantly silenced the room. "I don't know where we are, but the air smells different, and the gravity feels a little light. Henry says the house is having a stroke trying to put itself back together, and I'm pretty sure we're not in the Clover Kingdom anymore." "Captain!" Asta shouted, his eyes sparkling with an intensity that could power a small city. "I can feel it! There are super strong people outside." "I can't sense their mana, but the air is practically vibrating." "That's because it's not mana, kid," Yami said, narrowing his eyes as he looked toward the front door. "Whatever it is, it's thick, and it's coming this way." Noelle Silva, adjusting her Valkyrie armor with a huff of aristocratic indignation, stepped forward. "Well, we can't just sit here. We're Magic Knights. If we've stumbled into another territory, we have to establish diplomatic relations, or at least tell them we aren't here to stay. Diplomacy isn't really our thing, Noelle." Magna Swing laughed, cracking his knuckles as fire began to dance around his fingers. "But if they want to fight, I'm ready to show them how we do things in the boonies. The front doors of the Black Bull hideout swung open, revealing the lush, vibrant greenery of the Jura forest. Yami stepped out first, followed by Asta and the rest of the squad. They found themselves facing a small army. While Soe had been the first to arrive, the sound of the crash had drawn the goblin riders under the command of Rieger. And shortly after, the Kijin leaders, Benimaru, Hakuro, and Shion, had arrived to support their comrade. The two groups stood in a tense standoff. On one side, the Black Bulls, a collection of misfits, outcasts, and commoners, led by a man who looked like he could kill a god with a dirty look. On the other, the upper echelon of the Jura-Tempest Federation, monsters who had been named and evolved into beings of immense power, serving a slime they considered a deity. Benimaru stepped forward, his red hair flaming in the sunlight. He looked at Yami, sensing the massive, dark power swirling within the man. "You've trespassed into the territory of the great Rimuru Tempest," Benimaru said, his voice calm but layered with a threat. "State your name and your purpose, or be removed by force." Yami took a long drag from his cigarette and exhaled a cloud of smoke directly into the tense air. "The name's Yami Sukehiro. I'm the captain of the Black Bulls. As for our purpose, we're still trying to figure that out ourselves. We took a wrong turn at a spatial rift and ended up in your backyard." "Now, who's this Rimuru guy? Is he the king of this overgrown shrubbery?" Shion's grip tightened on her massive blade. "Gorimaru, you dare speak of the great Rimuru so casually?" Before the situation could devolve into a bloodbath, a blue slime bounced into the center of the clearing. In a flash of light, the slime transformed into a small, silver-haired child with golden eyes. Rimuru Tempest looked up at the Black Bulls, his great sage skill already working overtime. Notice, analyzing the targets. Analysis failed. The targets do not possess a magicule-based core. However, the individual known as Asta possesses a total lack of internal energy, yet he is emitting a localized field of anti-energy that is actively dissolving the surrounding magicules. High danger level detected. Rimuru blinked. He had seen otherworlders before, but these people were different. They didn't feel like the typical Japanese teenagers summoned by Leon Cromwell, or the Pharma's Kingdom. They felt like a hurricane that had been stuffed into a shoebox. "Hey everyone, stand down," Rimuru said, waving his hand dismissively at his subordinates. He looked at Yami and then at Asta, who was staring at him with wide, unblinking eyes. "I'm Rimuru Tempest. I'm the leader of this nation. You guys look like you've had a rough trip. How about we skip the fighting and talk this out over some food? I've got some great Japanese-style pub food and some sake that'll knock your socks off." Yami's expression shifted from murderous intent to genuine curiosity. "Japanese food, huh? And booze? Well, kid, you sure know how to talk to a captain. Asta, put that oversized butter knife away. We're going to lunch." "Yes, Captain!" Asta roared, the sheer volume of his voice making even the stoic Sue flinch. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Some things can't be fixed. The city of Rimuru was a marvel of rapid industrialization and monster-driven efficiency, a place where paved streets and running water existed in a world otherwise defined by medieval squalor. To the Black Bulls, it looked like a dream, or a trap. As they walked through the gates of the capital, the squad's reaction was characteristically fragmented. Vanessa was already eyeing the local taverns with predatory intent. Charmy was sniffing the air for exotic ingredients, and Gauche was obsessively polishing a photo of his sister Marie, muttering about how this new dimension was clearly a threat to her safety. Rimuru led them to a large, open-air pavilion, designed for diplomatic banquets. Shion and Shuna, the two female Kijin, moved with a grace that masked their lethality, laying out platters of tempura, grilled meats, and flagons of high-grade demon ale. It was a scene of peace, but the tension was thick enough to choke a dragon. Every time Asta took a step, the nearby streetlights, powered by magicules, flickered and died. The ornamental plants, infused with growth magic, wilted as he passed. He was a walking environmental hazard in a city built on the very energy he unknowingly erased. "So," Rimuru said, taking a seat and shifting into his human form. He leaned back, trying to look casual while his internal processor was screaming. "Warning! The anti-magic field generated by the individual Asta is interfering with the city's mana grid. Structural integrity of the pavilion is at 98% and dropping. You guys are magic knights, right? From the Clover Kingdom? Rimuru continued, ignoring the sage's warnings for a moment. In my world, my old world anyway, knights were usually a bit more disciplined. You lot look more like a group of high-risk convicts who stole a castle. Yami laughed, a sound like grinding stones, as he tore into a massive haunch of meat. You aren't far off, slime boy. The bulls are the trash bin of the Clover Kingdom. If you're too loud, too weird, too poor, or too violent for the real knights, you end up with me. We don't do things by the book. We just get the job done, and try not to burn the country down in the process. I like that, Rimuru admitted, a small smile playing on his lips. I started this place with a bunch of goblins who were about to be wiped out by direwolves. We're all outcasts here. But, while the leaders spoke of philosophy, the younger members of both groups were finding a more visceral way to communicate. Luck Voltia, the cheering wizard, hadn't stopped smiling since they arrived. His blue eyes darted from Benimaru to Hakuro, settled on the lizard man Gabiru, and finally locked onto the stoic orc disaster Geld. Luck's body crackled with lightning, real jagged bolts of electricity that made the nearby guards draw their spears. Hey, hey, Luck chirped, his voice sweet and terrifying. You guys are really strong, aren't you? I can feel the energy coming off you like a furnace. If I cut off one of your limbs, does it grow back? I'd really like to find out. Gabiru, ever the showman, puffed out his chest. Ho! A bold challenge from a tiny human. I, the great Gabiru, shall show you the power of a dragonute. Before Gabiru could finish his sentence, Luck was gone. He didn't just move fast. He became a literal stroke of lightning. A thunderclap echoed through the pavilion as Luck's kick connected with Gabiru's snout, sending the lizard man spiraling through the air like a discarded toy. The impact shattered a nearby stone pillar, sending debris flying toward the dining table. In an instant, the peaceful lunch turned into a tactical theater. Shion moved to intercept Luck, her massive blade swinging with enough force to cleave a mountain. Magna Swing, not wanting his rival to have all the fun, launched a fireball the size of a carriage, shouting about manly soul magic. The explosion rocked the pavilion, and for a terrifying moment, it looked like the Jura-Tempest Federation was about to go to war with its guests. Enough! The voice didn't come from Rimuru or Yami. It was Asta. He had drawn the Demon Slayer sword, and as he swung it in a wide arc, a wave of black, jagged energy surged outward. The effect was instantaneous and jarring. Shion's blade, glowing with purple aura, suddenly went dim. Magna's fire evaporated into thin air. Luck's lightning flickered and vanished, leaving him to tumble ungracefully to the ground. The silence that followed was heavy. The monsters of Tempest stared at Asta with something approaching genuine fear. In their world, power was everything. Magicules were the blood, the air, and the soul. To see someone simply turn off the world was a blasphemy beyond comprehension. Notice, the individual Asta has utilized a nullification event. All active skills and magic within a 50-meter radius have been suppressed. The logic of the Great Jura Forest is currently being overridden by an external law. Recommendation: do not engage this individual with magic-based attacks. Rimuru stood up, his golden eyes narrowing. He wasn't angry, but he was fascinated. He walked over to Asta, who was looking sheepish, rubbing the back of his head. Sorry, Rimuru-san. My friends get a little carried away. I had to stop them before they broke your nice house. Rimuru reached out and touched the flat of Asta's black blade. He felt nothing. No heat, no vibration, no soul. It was a piece of the void shaped like a sword. Asta, do you have any idea how dangerous you are in a world where everything is made of magic? Yamista blinked, his usual loud demeanor softening into confusion. Dangerous? I'm just a guy who works hard because I don't have any magic. I'm the weakest one in the squad. Yami stood up, walking over to join them, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. He's the weakest and the strongest, Slime. That's the irony of the Black Bulls. In our world, he's a freak. In yours, he's a god killer. And if I'm reading the room right, you've got some people coming your way who might need a little god killing. Rimuru looked toward the southern horizon. His subordinates, Suwei and Hakuro, had already alerted him to the approaching forces. The kingdom of Falmouth was mobilizing. They were bringing otherworlders of their own, people who saw this world as a video game, a place where they could murder and pillage without consequence because they had skills. "You're right," Rimuru said, his voice turning cold, a hint of the future demon lord peeking through his youthful facade. "There's a storm coming. Falmouth thinks they can just walk in here and take what we've built. They think they have the ultimate advantage because they have heroes on their side." "Heroes?" Noelle asked, stepping forward, her hand on her hip. "If they're anything like the heroes back in the Clover Kingdom who look down on commoners and slaughter those they're supposed to protect, then they aren't heroes at all. They're just bullies with better PR." "Exactly," Rimuru said. He looked at the ragtag group of black bulls. They were messy, they were loud, and they were undeniably violent. But he saw the way they looked at each other, the same way his monsters looked at him. They were a family. "I was going to handle this alone. I was going to follow the rules of this world. But maybe the rules need to be broken. Yami, Asta, how do you feel about helping me show Falmouth that they picked the wrong forest to play in?" Yami grinned, his cigarette glowing bright. "Surpassing our limits is what we do best. If these heroes want to fight, we'll give them one they won't survive. Besides, I still haven't finished that sake." The private research chamber deep within the central government building of Tempest was a sterile, magically reinforced vault designed for high-level analysis. It was a room where the laws of physics were frequently treated as suggestions, but even its reinforced walls seemed to groan under the sheer conceptual weight of the boy sitting in the center. Asta sat cross-legged on a pedestal, looking profoundly bored, while Rimuru Tempest hovered before him, in human form, his silver hair glowing with the soft blue light of active computation. For the last hour, Rimuru had been attempting something no being in this world had ever dared: a full, systemic scan of a human who existed entirely outside the voice of the world. In this universe, everything was data. Every breath of air, every spark of flame, and every drop of blood was composed of magicules, governed by a set of rigid, underlying laws known as skills. Even the most powerful demon lords were ultimately just complex programs running on the world's hardware. But Asta was a corruption in the source code. "Okay, Asta, just hold still one more time," Rimuru said, his voice tight with concentration. "Great Sage, initiate deep analysis. Use the all of creation subprocess to map the atomic structure of the target. Report. Initiating scan. Warning. Direct observation of the target is producing recursive errors. The target's internal state is not zero magicules. It is negative magicules. This is a mathematical impossibility, attempting to compensate." Within Rimuru's mind, the visual representation of the scan looked like a beautiful, shimmering tapestry of light being eaten by a black hole. Everywhere the Great Sage's analytical light touched Asta, the light didn't just stop. It ceased to have ever existed. It was as if a part of the universe was being deleted in real time. "Asta, do you feel anything?" Rimuru asked, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "Heat? Pressure? A tingling sensation?" "I feel like I really want to do some more push-ups, Rimuru-san," Asta shouted, his voice echoing off the reinforced walls. "Also, your head voice is really loud. It's like there's a very polite librarian screaming in my brain." Rimuru winced. "Sage, what does he mean head voice is loud? You're a mental process." "Notice. The target's anti-magic is not merely a physical field. It is a conceptual rejection of all supernatural phenomena. My analytical probes are being interpreted as spells and are being violently dismantled upon contact. Continuing the scan will result in a temporary shutdown of my processing core. Recommendation: abort." Rimuru sighed and waved his hand, deactivating the scan. The blue light faded, and the oppressive feeling of a world-ending paradox lifted from the room. "Forget it. You're a glitch, Asta. A walking, talking, screaming system error. If I tried to consume you to learn your powers, I'd probably accidentally delete myself from existence." "Is that bad?" Asta asked, tilting his head. "It's the worst kind of bad," Rimuru muttered, rubbing his temples. He looked at the black swords resting against the pedestal. Those blades weren't just weapons. They were the physical manifestation of a no, uttered to a world that demanded yes. In the Tensura world, where the Western Holy Church preached that monsters were defilements of the holy law, Asta was the ultimate defilement. He was the end of law itself. The door to the chamber slid open, and Yami Sukehiro walked in, trailed by a very frantic-looking Shuna. Yami was carrying a plate of purple, bubbling something that Shion had clearly prepared for him. To everyone's horror, the captain of the Black Bulls was actually eating it. "Hey, Slime, your secretary makes some weird-tasting stuff, but it's got a kick," Yami said, gesturing with a forkful of what looked like a sentient beet. "Anyway, we've got a problem. That shadow guy of yours, Sue, he just got back. He says the heroes from the human kingdom are about 10 miles out, and they aren't coming for a cultural exchange." Rimuru's demeanor shifted instantly. The curiosity of the scientist vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating weight of a ruler. "How many?" "3 otherworlders leading an army of 20,000, Yami said, his eyes narrowing. "But it's the kids I'm worried about." Sosi says, "They're talking about this place like it's a leveling zone. They're planning to farm your people for EXP. It's some real sociopathic behavior." Rimuru felt a cold rage bubbling in his chest. He knew the type. In his old life as Satoru Mikami, he'd played enough video games to know the mindset of a player who didn't view NPCs as living things. But in this world, those NPCs were his friends. They were his family. The Kingdom of Falmouth wasn't just coming to conquer. They were coming to commit a genocide that would be marketed as a holy crusade. "They have a plan," Rimuru said, his voice dropping an octave. "They're going to use a large-scale barrier, a holy field. It's a ritual that purges magicules from the air. In this world, that's a death sentence for monsters. It makes them weak, sick, and unable to use their skills. It's how the heroes kill things much stronger than them without breaking a sweat." "A barrier that eats magic, huh?" Yami grinned, a plume of smoke rising from his cigarette. "Sounds like a buffet for my brat over here." Asta stood up, his hand gripping the hilt of the Demon Slayer sword. The dark energy of the blade seemed to pulse in anticipation. "If they're using magic to hurt people who can't fight back, then I don't care if they're heroes or kings. I'm going to crush them." "It's not that simple, Asta," Rimuru cautioned. "The Western Holy Church is a corporate machine. They don't just use swords, they use PR. If we kill heroes in cold blood, the rest of the human world will see us as the monsters they've always claimed we are. We'll be hunted by every nation on the map." "Then don't kill them in cold blood," Yami said, his dark magic beginning to bleed from his katana, staining the floorboards black. "Kill them in a way that makes it clear that their god isn't watching. In my world, we have royals who think they're better than everyone because they were born with more mana. We call them trash. These heroes of yours, they're just higher quality trash, and trash needs to be taken out." Rimuru looked at the two of them, the captain who embraced the darkness and the boy who nullified the light. For months, Rimuru had tried to play by the rules of diplomacy. He had tried to be the good monster, but the world was showing him that goodness was a liability. The Black Bulls were a reminder that sometimes, to save a home, you had to be the thing that the good people feared most. "Asta, Yami, I'm going to let them set up their barrier," Rimuru said, a dark glint in his golden eyes. "I'm going to let them think they've won. I want them to feel completely safe. I want them to walk into the center of my city thinking they're the protagonists of a grand adventure." "And then?" Asta asked. "And then," Rimuru said, "I'm going to introduce them to the Black Bulls. I want you to show them what happens when you try to play a game with people who don't follow the rules." Outside, the sky over the Great Forest of Jura began to darken, not with clouds but with the shimmering gold of the anti-monster barrier being cast by the Falmouth mages. The air in the city grew heavy, and the goblins in the streets began to stumble, their strength being sapped by the holy light. The heroes of Falmouth, Shogo, Kirara, and Kyoya, stood at the forest's edge, laughing as they watched the nation of monsters begin to choke. They thought they were the hunters. They had no idea that a zero magic boy was currently sharpening a blade that could cut through the very concept of their god. The air over the capital city of Rimuru didn't just change, it died. At the cardinal points of the city's perimeter, the high-ranking mages of the Falmouth Kingdom, led by the Archbishop Reihi, completed the ritual for the two-layered barrier, the anti-monster barrier, and the prison field. To the citizens of Tempest, it felt as though the very oxygen had been replaced with liquid lead. Goblins collapsed in the streets, clutching their chests, as the magicules that sustained their evolved forms were forcibly leached from their bodies. Rigurd, the Prime Minister, fell to one knee, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Even the Kijin felt their strength drain away, their connection to the world's mana severed by the holy frequency of the Western Holy Church's ultimate weapon. From the northern gate, three figures walked into the city with the casual gait of tourists visiting a museum. Shogo Taguchi, the berserker, cracked his knuckles, a predatory grin splitting his face, as he watched a group of goblin children struggle to stand. Beside him, Kyoya Tachibana, the severer, rested a hand on the hilt of his katana, his eyes hidden behind long bangs. Trailing behind was Kirara Mizutani, her expression one of bored disgust. "Man, this is pathetic," Shogo laughed, kicking a collapsed stall of fruit as he walked. "They said these were monsters of the forest, but they're just punching bags. I was hoping for a challenge, but I guess I'll just have to settle for the EXP." "Don't kill them all too fast, Shogo," Kirara drawled, her voice-based unique skill already humming in her throat. "I want to see if I can make them tear each other apart first. It's more entertaining that way." They stopped in the central plaza, where a small group of Tempest defenders had gathered to make a desperate stand. Hakuro, the elderly swordmaster, and Shion were there, but they were shadows of themselves. Shion could barely lift her heavy blade, her purple aura flickering like a dying candle. "Oh, a big one," Shogo said, eyeing Shion. "You look like you might survive a few hits." "Too bad the barrier makes you a level 1 scrub." Shogo lunged forward, his fist glowing with the power of his berserker skill. In this field, his physical strength was absolute, while the monsters were nothing. He expected the satisfying sound of shattering bone and the spray of purple blood. Instead, he heard a sound like a heavy iron gate slamming shut. Clang! Shogo's fist didn't hit the weakened Kijin, it hit the flat of a massive, rusted black blade that had appeared from nowhere. The shockwave of the impact rippled outward, but it didn't push the wielder back an inch. Standing in front of Shion was a short boy with ash-blonde hair, his clothes tattered, but his stance as solid as a mountain. Asta didn't look weakened. He didn't look sick. In fact, he looked extremely annoyed. "Hey," Asta said, his voice low and dangerous, lacking its usual cheerful volume. "What do you think you're doing to these people?" Shogo blinked, stepping back to look at the boy. "A human? What the hell is a human doing in a monster city? And how are you standing up? This barrier is supposed to suppress everything." "This barrier?" Asta glanced up at the shimmering gold dome above them. "It feels a bit itchy, I guess. But it's just magic, right? And I don't have any of that." Kyoya stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he analyzed Asta. "Shogo, look at the ground. The barrier. It's not touching him. It's bending around him like he's a rock in a stream. No, that's not right. He's eating the edges of the field." It was true. Where Asta stood, the oppressive gold light of the prison field was being shredded into black tatters. He was a localized zone of reality, where the Falmouth ritual simply didn't exist. "Who cares?" Shogo spat, his ego bruised by the blocked strike. "If he's human, he's just a low-level NPC. Get out of the way, kid, before I put a hole in your chest." "Asta, stand down!" a voice drawled from the shadows of a nearby alleyway. Yami Sukehiro stepped out, followed by the rest of the black bulls. Unlike the monsters, who were suffering, the bulls looked perfectly fine. Vanessa was casually adjusting her hat, and Ghosh was staring at his mirror with a bored expression. "Captain!" Asta shouted, regaining some of his energy. "These guys are the heroes Rimuru talked about. They're really mean." Yami took a long drag from his cigarette, the smoke curling around his face. He looked at Shogo, then at Kyoya, his gaze lingering on the katana. "So, you're the Otherworlders, huh? I've met a lot of arrogant punks in my time, but you lot really take the cake. You walk into someone's home, poison the air, and then act like you're doing God's work." "We are doing God's work," Kyoya said, drawing his sword. The air around the blade shimmered with the Severer skill, a power designed to cut through any physical or magical defense. This world exists for the strong. These monsters are just resources. If you're humans from another world, you should understand that. Join us, and maybe we'll let you have a piece of the loot." Yami chuckled, a dark, vibrating sound. "Loot? Resources? You're talking like this is a game. Let me tell you something, kid. I'm a foreigner too. I know what it's like to be in a place where nobody wants you. But these monsters? They're better people than any royal I've ever met. And I don't like people who bully my friends." "Fine," Shogo roared, his body bulked up by his skill. "Then you can die with the rest of the trash. Berserker, all-out assault." Shogo disappeared in a blur of motion, reappearing in front of Yami with a flurry of strikes that could level a building. At the same time, Kikyoya moved toward Asta, his blade flashing in a series of invisible cuts. Kirara opened her mouth to scream a command that would force the Black Bulls to kill each other, but the heroes of Falmouth were about to learn a very painful lesson about the difference between a skill and experience. Magna's swing and luck Voltia intercepted Shogo before he could reach Yami. Magna's fireballs weren't made of magicules, they were made of mana, the life force of his own universe. In the Holy Field, which was tuned to suppress the specific frequency of this world's magic, the Black Bull's powers were entirely unaffected. Magna's Soul Chain Deathmatch ignited, tethering Shogo's energy to his own. What is this? Shogo gasped, feeling his immense strength suddenly being halved, pulled into the grinning commoner in front of him. My skill. It's being drained. It's called hard work, you prick. Magna yelled, slamming a flaming bat into Shogo's jaw. Meanwhile, Kyoya's invisible slashes struck Asta's Demon Slayer sword, and simply stopped. Asta didn't even need to use a skill. He just swung the heavy iron slab with the speed of a professional athlete, the anti-magic edge catching Kyoya's unbreakable blade. Snap. The Severer's Sword, a legendary grade weapon gifted by the King of Falmouth, shattered like glass. Kyoya stared at the hilt in his hand, his mind unable to process the failure of his unique skill. Your sword is weak, Asta said, his eyes glowing with the faint red light of the devil within. Because there's no heart behind it. You're just a bully who got lucky with a cheat code. Yami stepped forward, his katana still sheathed. He looked up at the gold barrier, and then back at the terrified otherworlders. Hey Asta, the slime wants us to wait for his signal to break the big dome. But I think we can at least take out the trash in the meantime. Surpass your limits, right here, right now. Yes, sir! The squad roared in unison. The heroes of Falmouth had come to slaughter monsters. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a plaza with the most dangerous collection of lunatics in the multiverse. The central plaza of Tempest, usually a place of vibrant trade and laughter, had become a graveyard of expectations. Sogo Taguchi, the man who had murdered his way through his own world before being summoned to this one, stared at his trembling hands. His berserker skill was supposed to be absolute. It was a unique skill, a gift from the voice of the world that granted him physical power beyond the limits of biological possibility. But as he looked at the commoner with the pompadour and the grinning boy crackling with lightning, Shogo felt something he hadn't experienced since his arrival in this world. He felt small. What are you? Shogo stammered, his voice cracking. The barrier, the Archbishop said. The Holy Field makes all monsters into insects. You're humans. You shouldn't be able to move like that. Magnaswing spat on the cobblestones, his flaming bat resting casually on his shoulder. Listen, you pampered little brat. Back home, we have royals who talk just like you. They think because they were born with a bigger gas tank, they own the road. But out in the boonies, we learned that it doesn't matter how much mana you have if you don't know how to throw a punch. My fire doesn't give a damn about your holy field because it doesn't come from your world's magic. It comes from my soul. Beside him, Luck Voltia's eyes were glowing with a terrifying manic blue light. Can we stop talking now? I want to see how many times I can kick you before you stop breathing. It's a game. Let's play. Luck vanished. Not with the calculated teleportation of a skill, but with the raw, atmospheric friction of lightning-enhanced speed. Shogo's all-seeing eye sub-skill tried to track the movement, but the logic was flawed. Luck wasn't moving through the magicule-dense air. He was manipulating the very electrons of the environment. A series of thunderous cracks echoed through the plaza as Luck struck Shogo from 12 different directions in the span of a second. Shogo roared, swinging wildly, but his fists hit only ozone and laughter. Every time he tried to activate his berserker state to its maximum, the flaming chain connected to his chest, Magna's Soul Chain Deathmatch, pulsed with a dull heat, dragging his energy levels down to match Magna's. It was the ultimate equalizer. The hero was being forced to fight on the level of a commoner, and without his massive stat advantage, he was nothing more than a clumsy brawler. A few yards away, Kyoya Tachibana was facing a different kind of nightmare. He had always prided himself on his Severer skill, a power that allowed him to perceive the lines of essence in all things and cut them. To Kyoya, the world was a series of fragile threads, but as he stared at Asta, he saw nothing. No lines, no essence, no future. Asta lunged, the demon slayer sword held low. Kyoya's mind raced, his unique skill screaming at him to parry, but as his shattered blade met the black iron of Asta's sword, the anti-magic surged upward. It wasn't just a physical impact, it was a conceptual erasure. The Severer skill, the very thing that made Kyoya a hero, flickered and died. The all-seeing eye in his socket turned dull and gray. My eye, Kyoya screamed, clutching his face as the magic was sucked out of his nervous system. I can't see the lines. Where did the lines go? You're so obsessed with seeing power that you've forgotten how to actually fight, Asta said, his voice echoing with the guttural resonance of the devil, Libe, residing within his grimoire. You're not a swordsman. You're just a kid with a sharp toy. In the Black Bulls, we don't have skills. We have scars. And we have each other. Asta spun, the flat of his blade slamming into Kyoya's ribs with enough force to send the otherworlder flying through the wall of a nearby stone building. The impact was deafening, but it was the silence that followed, the absence of magical resonance, that truly terrified the Falmouth soldiers watching from the sidelines. Kirara Mizutani, the third hero, realized the tide had turned. She took a deep breath, her bewilder skill ready to be unleashed. Die! She screamed, the word vibrating with a frequency that should have forced everyone in the plaza to stop their own hearts. But as the sound waves traveled toward the Black Bulls, a small red thread appeared in the air. Vanessa Inoteka sat atop a nearby roof, her familiar, Rouge the Red Cat, batting at the air with a bored paw. The thread of fate twitched. The sound of Kirara's voice didn't vanish, it simply missed. The sonic attack curved unnaturally around the bulls, striking a group of Falmouth knights instead, who immediately collapsed, their hearts seizing in obedience to their own hero's command. What? Kirara gasped, her face pale. My voice? It didn't work? Why didn't it work? Fate is a tricky thing, honey, Vanessa said, taking a sip from a bottle of Tempest brewed wine. And right now, fate decided that you're incredibly annoying. Maybe you should try singing lessons instead of murder. Yami Sukehiro stood in the center of the carnage, his cigarette still burning. He looked up at the golden dome of the prison field. He could feel Rimuru's presence nearby, waiting for the right moment. The slime was a tactician, a man who wanted to minimize casualties and maximize the political impact. But Yami knew that some things couldn't be settled with words or clean victories. The Falmouth Kingdom hadn't just attacked a city, they had tried to break a family. All right, Asta, Yami growled, his hand finally gripping the hilt of his katana. The warm-up is over. The slime is getting ready to evolve, and he needs these losers out of the way. Let's show this world what happens when you try to cage a bull. High above, Rimuru Tempest watched the battle through Soei's Argos skill. He was stunned. He had analyzed the otherworlders and knew they were powerful, but the Black Bulls weren't just fighting them. They were dismantling them. They were attacking the very logic of the Tensura world. Report. The individual, Yami Sukehiro, is manifesting a dimensional interference field. He is not using magicules. He is using a concentrated form of spiritual energy to distort the local fabric of space. This is similar to a true dragon's aura, but fundamentally different in origin. They really are something else, Rimuru whispered. He felt a surge of confidence. If these outsiders could defy the voice of the world, then he too could defy his destiny as a mere monster. Great Sage, prepare the God's Wrath spell. Let's finish what the bulls started. In the plaza, Shogo, Kyoya, and Kirara backed away, huddled together, their arrogance replaced by a primal, stuttering fear. They looked at the Black Bulls, the drunkard, the delinquent, the psychopath, and the magicless boy, and they saw their own ends. You can't do this, Shogo screamed, his berserker skill flickering one last time. We're heroes. We're the protagonists. This world belongs to us. This world belongs to the people who live in it, Asta said, stepping forward, his three swords hovering around him as his black form began to manifest, one wing of darkness unfurling from his shoulder. And you? You're just in the way. The golden light of the prison field didn't just illuminate the city, it judged it. To the eyes of the Western Holy Church mages, stationed at the cardinal points of the forest, the shimmering dome was a holy mandate, a physical manifestation of the law that stated monsters had no right to exist. Within its confines, the very essence of the Jura-Tempest Federation was being digested. Even with the heroes of Falmouth lying broken in the central plaza, The barrier remained, a silent, persistent executioner. It was tuned to the frequency of the spirit, a vibration that ignored physical armor, and struck directly at the magicule-based biology of every citizen in Rimuru's nation. In the center of the plaza, Xion lay slumped against a stone fountain, her breathing shallow, her once vibrant purple skin turning a sickly, pale gray. Beside her, Hakuro leaned heavily on his cane, his eyes clouded. The black bulls stood in a protective circle around them, but the frustration was mounting. They could punch the heroes, but they couldn't punch the air itself. "This is getting annoying," Yami growled, his hand tightening on his katana. He looked at the sky, his dark magic flickering, but even his dimensional slash would only create a temporary hole in the field. The barrier was self-healing, drawing energy from the prayer cycles of the mages miles away. "Hey, Asta, you're the only one here who treats magic like it's a personal insult. Can you do something about this oversized lampshade?" Asta looked up, his black form still flickering with the residue of his fight with Kyoya. He looked at the Demon Slayer's sword in his hand, then at the Demon Dweller, and finally at the smallest of his three blades, the Demon Destroyer. Unlike the other two, which were designed for blunt force erasure and magical absorption, the Destroyer was specialized. It dealt with causality. It didn't just cut magic. It severed the relationship between a cause and its effect. "I think so, Captain," Asta said, his voice regaining its usual booming resonance. "If that dome is the effect of someone's magic, then I just need to tell the magic it never happened." "Do it, brat," Yami said, exhaling a thick cloud of smoke. "Before the slime decides to do something drastic and kills everyone in a 10-mile radius just to get the job done." Asta didn't just jump, he ignited. Using the black form's singular wing, he propelled himself toward the ceiling of the Golden Dome. Below him, the city looked like a dying organism, its lights flickering and its people gasping. As he reached the apex of the field, the holy energy began to lash out at him, recognizing him as the ultimate heresy. The gold light turned into searing white needles, attempting to pierce his flesh, but the anti-magic coating his body acted like a suit of impenetrable armor. Notice, the individual Asta is approaching the focal point of the prison field. Analysis, he is manifesting the Demon Destroyer sword. Caution, if he attempts to nullify the barrier from the inside, the resulting conceptual backlash could result in a localized collapse of space-time. Rimuru, floating high above the clouds, watched through his Argos network. "Let him do it, Sage. He's a black bull. They don't care about backlash. They just care about their friends." Asta reached the very top of the dome. He didn't swing the sword like a bat. He pressed the tip of the Demon Destroyer directly against the shimmering gold surface. "Causality break!" Asta roared. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. It wasn't the silence of peace, but the silence of a record being scratched. The black energy from the sword didn't shatter the gold dome, it bled into it. It looked like ink dropped into a bowl of holy water. The blackness raced along the geometric lines of the barrier, turning the gold to lead, then to ash, then to nothing. The mages at the perimeter of the forest screamed in unison. Their staves shattered, and the holy books they held burst into flames. The source of the barrier, the faith-based energy they were channeling, was being violently rejected by a force that didn't just oppose their god, but ignored the concept of divinity entirely. The prison field didn't just fall, it was unwritten. The effect on the city was instantaneous. The leaden air vanished, replaced by a sudden, violent rush of magicules. To the monsters of Tempest, it was like a drowning man suddenly being pulled to the surface. Xion's eyes snapped open, a surge of purple energy erupting from her body with such force that it cracked the cobblestones. Hakuro stood tall, his grip on his cane turning into a grip on a weapon of war. "The air," Shuna whispered, her strength returning in a warm, golden wave. "The magic is back." Asta tumbled from the sky, his black form fading as he exhausted his current limit. He hit the ground with a dull thud, but before he could even complain about the landing, he was hoisted into the air by a cheering crowd of goblins. He did it. The loud boy broke the light. But the celebration was short-lived. High above, the sky had turned a deep, bruised purple. Rimuru Tempest was no longer the silver-haired child they knew. He was a silhouette against the sun, surrounded by thousands of floating droplets of water. His god's wrath, Megiddo spell. Yami looked up, his eyes narrowing. "Well, looks like the boss is finally ready to punch his clock." Everyone, get under cover. The slime is about to remind the world why you don't mess with a monster's home. Captain, Asta shouted, shaking off the goblins. We have to stop him from killing everyone, don't we? That's what heroes do. Yami looked at his student, then at the terrified Falmouth army retreating in the distance. He then looked at Shion, who was still nursing the wounds she had received while she was weakened. He remembered the feeling of the Clover Kingdom's nobles looking down on him, the feeling of being hunted for the crime of existing. Asta, Yami said, his voice unusually quiet. In this world, sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to let the person at the top burn it down so they can build something better. We aren't here to be heroes, we're here to be the Black Bulls. And right now? The Black Bulls are allies of the Demon Lord. As Yami spoke, the first beam of light descended from the sky. It wasn't a blast of fire or a bolt of lightning. It was a silent, pencil-thin ray of concentrated sunlight that passed through the helmet of a Falmouth knight like he was made of mist. Then another. Then 100. Then 1,000. The Falmouth invasion didn't end in a battle. It ended in a massacre. The Black Bulls stood in the center of the city, watching as the Holy Crusade was dismantled with surgical, terrifying precision. For the first time, even Luck Voltia didn't feel like fighting. He just watched the sky, his blue eyes reflecting the cold, calculated slaughter. Is this what happens here? Noelle asked, her voice trembling slightly. Does power always have to be this absolute? It's not about power, Noelle, Vanessa said, her hand resting on the younger girl's shoulder. It's about what you're willing to do to keep the people you love safe. Rimuru isn't doing this because he likes it. He's doing it because he doesn't have a choice. In that moment, the Black Bulls realized they weren't just in another world, they were in a crucible. And as the harvest festival began, and the voice of the world began to echo through the forest, announcing the evolution of a new demon lord, the bulls knew their own limits were about to be tested in ways the Clover Kingdom could never imagine. The air over the Jura-Tempest Federation didn't just grow cold, it became heavy with the weight of a divine presence. The voice of the world was no longer a whisper in the back of one's mind. It was a thunderous, rhythmic vibration that seemed to echo from the very marrow of the earth. Rimuru Tempest had descended from the sky, his silver hair trailing like a comet's tail, as he landed in the center of the capital. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The thousands of souls he had harvested during God's wrath were being processed by the world itself, fueled by the cold, dark intent of a protector who had finally abandoned his mercy. Notice, the voice boomed, audible to everyone within the city limits. The conditions have been met. The harvest festival shall now commence. All residents of the Jura-Tempest Federation who are linked to the individual Rimuru Tempest shall receive a gift. Evolution into a true demon lord is beginning. As the words faded, a wave of profound drowsiness washed over the monsters. Benimaru, Shion, Hakuro, the very pillars of the nation, collapsed where they stood, their bodies cocooned in glowing magicules as they entered the deep sleep required for their own secondary evolutions. Even the goblins and lizardmen fell into a magical slumber, leaving the city's defense in a precarious state. Well, that's just great, Yami growled, catching a sleeping, snoring Shuna before she hit the pavement. He looked around the plaza. His own squad was the only thing still moving. The Black Bulls, possessing no gift link to Rimuru and no magicule-based biology to be recalibrated, stood as the only awake sentinels in a city of sleeping giants. The slime's taking a nap, his generals are unconscious, and the air feels like it's made of lead. Asta, stop vibrating! You're giving me a headache! I can't help it, Captain, Asta shouted, his hand on the hilt of the Demon Slayer sword. I can feel them. Even though the big army is gone, there are shadows moving in the forest. They're fast, and they don't feel like those loud heroes we just fought. Yami narrowed his eyes. Asta was right. While Rimuru's Megiddo had wiped out the main force of the Falmouth army, the kingdom's true elite, the Blood Shadows, had been held in reserve. These weren't just summoned teenagers with ego problems. They were the Western Holy Church's secret executioners, human warriors who had spent decades refining their skills specifically to kill high-ranking monsters. And they knew that the moment of a demon lord's evolution was the moment of their greatest vulnerability. All right, listen up, Yami commanded, his voice cutting through the eerie silence of the evolving city. Finral, Gauche, you're on eye-in-the-sky duty. I want portals and mirrors covering every major entrance to the plaza. Noelle, Charmy, you're protecting the medical area. If any of those shadow creeps get near the sleeping monsters, blast them into the next dimension. Magna, Luck, Asta, you're with me. We're going to intercept the trash before they even reach the gate. Understood. The coordination of the Black Bulls was a thing of chaotic beauty. In the Clover Kingdom, they were known for their lack of discipline, but in a crisis, they operated with a telepathic efficiency born from years of shared near-death experiences. Finral Rulacase didn't need to be told where to go. He opened a series of spatial tunnels that allowed Gauche Adley to position himself on the highest spires of the city. From there, Gauche utilized his mirror magic real double to create hundreds of shimmering glass surfaces, turning the entire city into a panopticon. Target sighted. Gauche's voice crackled through a communication mirror. West Gate. 12 intruders. They're using some kind of invisibility magic. Wait, no, they're phasing through the physical world. My mirrors are having trouble locking on. If they're phasing, then they're made of magic, Asta said, a dark grin spreading across his face. And I'm the best at breaking magic. Asta didn't wait for a portal. He launched himself from the top of a building, his black form unfurling. In this state, he didn't just see the intruders. He felt the mana they were using to stay invisible. To Asta's eyes, the phased assassins looked like smudges of gray ink against the vibrant world. The blood shadows thought they were ghosts. They moved through the streets of Rimuru with the confidence of men who had assassinated kings. Their leader, a man known only as Rasen's disciple, held a jagged dagger coated in a soul-corroding poison. He saw the silver-haired boy, Rimuru, lying in the center of the plaza, surrounded by a swirling vortex of purple energy. It was a target too easy to believe. Now, the assassin whispered. He lunged, his body becoming a blur of non-existence, only to be met with a horizontal swing of a black iron slab that shouldn't have been able to touch him. The Demon Slayer's sword didn't just hit the assassin, it dragged him back into the physical world. The phasing magic shattered like a glass jar dropped on stone. How? The assassin gasped, coughing up blood as he was pinned to a wall by the sheer weight of Asta's blade. I was in the astral plane. No physical weapon can reach me. I don't know what an astral plane is, Asta roared, his voice shaking the nearby windows. But if you're using magic to hide, you're just a coward. Get out of my friend's city. Behind Asta, Luck Voltia and Magna Swing arrived like a pair of twin disasters. Luck didn't bother with words. He kicked off the air itself, his legs encased in jagged blue lightning. Each strike was a thunderclap, his Thunder God's boots allowing him to move faster than the assassins could even track with their thought acceleration skills. Hey, hey, Luck laughed, his eyes wide and manic. You guys are much better at hiding than fighting. Let's see how long you can last if I keep increasing the voltage. Magna followed up with a barrage of vanishing fireballs, the flames weaving through the air to track the fleeing shadows. You think you're the only ones who can play hide and seek? My fire tracks the soul, you bastards. While the frontline fighters dismantled the main force, the real threat attempted to bypass them. A group of 3 high-level mages from the Holy Church utilized a dimensional step to appear directly in the medical ward where Xion and the others were evolving. They aimed to destroy the cocoons, knowing that killing the subordinates would deal a psychological blow to the emerging demon lord. But they hadn't accounted for the sea dragon's cradle. A massive sphere of swirling, high-pressure water blocked their path. Noelle Silva stood at the center, her Valkyrie armor shimmering with a cold, regal light. You dare attempt to strike at those who cannot defend themselves? She asked, her voice dripping with the disdain of a true royal. How pathetic. I am Noelle Silva of the Clover Kingdom's royalty, and you are not fit to stand in the presence of my allies. The mages laughed, preparing a high-level fire spell to evaporate the water. A little girl with some bubbles? Die! Noelle didn't flinch. She pointed her wand, and the water didn't just move, it evolved. Sea dragons roar. The blast wasn't just a wave, it was a concentrated pillar of crushing oceanic pressure. In this world, water magic was often limited by the magicules available in the environment, but Noelle's power was internal, fueled by the sheer, unyielding mana of the Silva bloodline. The dragon of water tore through the mage's fire spell, as if it were a candle flame, consuming them and the building they were standing on, leaving nothing but a wet crater in the street. As the last of the blood shadows fell, Yami Sukehiro stood over the unconscious form of Rimuru. He looked up at the sky, where the purple vortex was beginning to stabilize. The city was safe, for now. The Black Bulls had held the line while the world rewrote itself. "The slime's getting stronger," Yami whispered, sensing the shift in the air. "Asta, get back here. The harvest festival is almost over, and something tells me that when the kid wakes up, he's not going to be the same friendly slime we had lunch with." The silence that followed the harvest festival was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a world holding its breath. In the center of the plaza, the purple vortex that had cocooned Rimuru Tempest for hours began to crack, shedding flakes of crystalline mana that dissolved before they could hit the ground. The air didn't just feel different, it felt rewritten. To the Black Bulls, who stood as the only witnesses to this metaphysical metamorphosis, the pressure was nearly physical. It was like standing at the base of a dam that was starting to burst. "Captain," Asta whispered, his voice uncharacteristically small. He was gripping the hilt of the Demon Destroyer's sword so hard his knuckles were white. The air, it's screaming. It's not just magic anymore. It's like the world itself is bowing down. Yami Sukehiro didn't answer immediately. He took a final long drag of his cigarette and flicked the ash toward the shattered remains of a Falmouth shield. His dark magic was reacting instinctively, coiling around his blade like a cornered viper. "Yeah, kid. The slime isn't a slime anymore. He's something much worse. Or much better, depending on whose side you're on." The cocoon shattered. From the fragments emerged a figure that looked like the boy they had shared sake with. But the resemblance was now merely a courtesy. Rimuru's hair had lengthened into a shimmering river of silver-blue silk, and his eyes, once a friendly, curious gold, now burned with a depthless cosmic light. He stood up, and for a moment, the gravity in the plaza shifted, pulling the loose debris toward him, as if he were the center of a new planet. "Great Sage. No, Wisdom King Raphael," Rimuru murmured, his voice echoing with a dual-layered resonance. "Initiate the secret art of resurrection." This was the moment the Black Bulls had been waiting for, yet it was the moment that filled even the most battle-hardened among them with a sense of dread. To bring back the dead was a taboo in every world. In the Clover Kingdom, it was the realm of forbidden magic, of devils and soul corruption. Here it was being performed as a systematic, cold calculation. Two figures appeared from the shadows behind Rimuru, summoned from the depths of the underworld to provide the necessary magicules for the ritual. One was a tall, slender man, with black hair streaked with red, wearing the impeccable suit of a high society butler. His presence was so overwhelming that Luck Voltia, usually the first to charge into a fight, actually took a step back, his lightning flickering eyes wide with a rare, primal caution. "Oh?" the butler said, his voice a smooth, terrifying silk. He turned his gaze toward the Black Bulls, his eyes, black with gold pupils, narrowing with intense curiosity. "I was told this nation was composed of monsters, yet I see humans. And one among you is quite the paradox." "Back off, fancy pants," Yami growled, stepping between the butler and Asta. "We're the guests, you're the help. Keep your eyes on the boss." The butler Diablo chuckled, a sound that sent a chill through the plaza. "A captain with a sharp tongue. How delightful. I am the primordial black, currently serving as the humble servant of the great Rimuru. And while I would love to dissect the nature of your anti-magic, my master has a miracle to perform." The ritual began. Rimuru extended his hands, and the souls he had harvested from the 20,000 Falmouth soldiers began to glow, turning into a river of purple light that flowed into the bodies of the fallen citizens. Shion, the one the bulls had grown most fond of in their short stay, began to glow with a soft, ethereal radiance. The wounds on her chest, the ones that had been fatal only hours ago, simply ceased to be. "This is insane," Noelle Silva whispered, her hand over her mouth. "He's actually doing it. He's reaching into the afterlife and pulling them back." "It's not for free, Noelle," Vanessa said, her eyes fixed on the thousands of souls being consumed as fuel. "Look at the price. 20,000 lives to bring back a few dozen. This is the mercy of a demon lord. It's a beautiful, horrific balance." As the light faded, Shion's eyes flickered open. She sat up, coughing, and looked around with confusion that quickly turned to realization. When she saw Rimuru, she didn't see a monster, she saw her savior. One by one, the citizens of Tempest woke up, their bodies stronger, their souls evolved, and their loyalty to the slime now absolute. Rimuru turned toward the Black Bulls. The coldness in his eyes softened just a fraction, a ghost of the friend they knew returning to the surface. "Thank you," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Sue told me what you did while I was asleep. You protected my people. You held the line against the church's assassins when I couldn't." "Don't get mushy on us, slime," Yami said, though his posture finally relaxed. "We don't like bullies, and those Falmouth guys were the biggest bullies I've ever seen. Besides, Asta needed the exercise." "I'm glad you're back, Rimuru-san," Asta shouted, his usual volume returning with a vengeance. "But you feel different now, like there's a giant mountain sitting on top of your soul." "I am different," Rimuru admitted, looking at his hands. "I tried to be a human. I tried to follow the rules of a world that didn't want me. But I've learned that if you want to protect a home like this, you have to be willing to become the monster everyone fears." "Well, you've certainly succeeded at that," Yami said, glancing at Diablo, who was currently glaring at Asta's Demon Slayer sword with a mix of hunger and hatred. "But what now?" "You've got a city full of evolved monsters, a primordial demon for a butler, and an entire kingdom that's going to be looking for their missing army." Rimuru looked toward the southern horizon, his gaze piercing through the trees of the Jura forest, toward the lands of the humans. "Now, we stop reacting. The Western Holy Church and the Kingdom of Falmouth think they can dictate who lives and who dies in this forest. I'm going to show them that the Jura-Tempest Federation is no longer a collection of monsters. We are a superpower, and if they want a war of gods, I'll give them one." The Black Bulls looked at each other. They had come to this world as accidental tourists, but they were quickly becoming the vanguard of a revolution. In the Clover Kingdom, they fought to maintain the status quo of a flawed monarchy. Here, they were the elite force of a rising demon lord, the only ones capable of striking down the magic that the holy world used as a leash. "We're with you, Rimuru," Noelle said, her voice steady. "The Silva family doesn't bow to bullies, and neither do the Black Bulls." "Good," Rimuru said, a dark, triumphant smile crossing his lips. "Because the next step isn't just defense. We're going to the Walpurgis. We're going to face the other demon lords. And I want the Black Bulls to be the ones who tell them that the rules of this world have changed." As the sun rose over the reborn city of Tempest, the Black Bulls stood atop the ramparts, watching as the citizens celebrated their resurrection. They were outcasts, freaks, and failures, and they had just helped birth a god. The aftermath of a miracle is often a vacuum, a hollow space, where the survivors wait for the other shoe to drop. For the Jura-Tempest Federation, that vacuum lasted exactly 3 hours. While the citizens celebrated their resurrection, and Rimuru adjusted to the cold, analytical whisper of the Wisdom King Raphael in his mind, the Western Holy Church was already moving to purify the anomaly. They didn't send an army this time. Armies were for conquest. The Holy Inquisition was for erasure. 10 figures materialized at the edge of the city's new, reinforced perimeter. These weren't the brawling otherworlders of Falmouth, or the desperate blood shadows. They were the 7 Days clergy's hand-picked executioners, led by a man whose very existence was a testament to the church's absolute authority. Cardinal Nicolaus's personal shadow, a saint-level combatant named Arno Baumann. Alongside him were the holy law enforcers, warriors who didn't use magicules in the traditional sense, but channeled the spirit of the world to enforce the literal laws of physics, laws that mandated the death of all monsters. "Target confirmed," Arno said, his voice as sterile as a surgical theater. He looked at the city of Rimuru, which was now radiating a demonic aura so thick it distorted the horizon. "The slime has ascended. The prophecy of the disaster-class monster has been fulfilled. We are no longer here to negotiate or capture. We are here to enact the judgment of the 7 luminaries." In the central plaza, Yami Sukehiro stood up from a pile of rubble, his senses screaming. He didn't need a unique skill to tell him that something far worse than a few teenagers had arrived. This wasn't just a threat to the city, it was a threat to the concept of freedom. The energy coming from the forest's edge felt like the self-righteous arrogance of the Clover Kingdom's Clover King, multiplied by 1,000 and armed with the power to rewrite reality. "Asta, kid, wake up," Yami said, kicking the boy's foot. Zata, who had been snoring loudly despite the cosmic stakes, bounced to his feet instantly, his hand reaching for the demon slayer. The fun's not over. We've got some holy guys at the front door, and they're bringing a spell that smells like a funeral. The Inquisition didn't announce themselves with a shout. They announced themselves with disintegration. The sky above the city turned a blinding, crystalline white. It wasn't fire or lightning. It was a conceptual attack, a multi-layered magic circle that covered the entire sky, designed to break down the molecular bonds of anything it touched. It was the ultimate delete button of the Western Holy Church. Notice, Raphael's voice echoed in Rimuru's mind. A high-level holy spell disintegration has been initiated. Defensive barriers are insufficient. Chance of total annihilation for the city, 100%. Not on my watch, Rimuru hissed, preparing to manifest his own Beelzebub to swallow the attack. But he was too slow. A streak of black energy shot past him, a boy with one black wing and a slab of rusted iron that seemed to drink the very light of the sun. Asta didn't fly toward the magic circle. He threw himself into it. "I don't care if you're holy," Asta roared, the black form consuming half his body, as his devil, Liebe, lent him every ounce of spite they possessed. "If you're using your power to kill people who just got their lives back, then your god is a total jerk." Asta swung the demon destroyer sword in a full 360-degree spin. The disintegration spell, a miracle that took years to master and centuries to refine, didn't explode. It didn't fizzle. It shattered like a sheet of ice hit by a sledgehammer. The white light turned into black ash, and the conceptual law of the spell was violently overwritten by the law of nullification. The holy law enforcers at the forest's edge staggered, blood spraying from their eyes and ears, as the backlash of their shattered faith hit them like a physical blow. Arno Baumann stared at the sky, his composure finally breaking. Impossible. That was a saint-level miracle. No creature, demon or otherwise, can simply cut the word of God. "Maybe your god should have used a better font," Magna Swing shouted, appearing behind Arno through a spatial portal opened by Finral. The climax had begun. The Black Bulls didn't wait for orders. They fell upon the Inquisition like a pack of wolves. This was the fight they were built for, the struggle of the unblessed against the divine. Luck Voltia was a blue blur, his lightning strikes now infused with the residual magicules of the Demon Lord's evolution. He wasn't just hitting the knights, he was bypassing their holy armor by vibrating at a frequency that nullified their defensive barriers. Every kick was a sonic boom that sent an inquisitor flying into the ancient trees. Noelle Silva manifested her Valkyrie armor, mermaid form, the air around her turning into a literal ocean. She faced off against 3 holy enforcers who tried to use water manipulation to drown the city. "You think you control the tides?" Noelle asked, her voice cold and majestic. "I am the daughter of a royal house that has commanded the seas for generations. Your holy water is nothing more than a puddle compared to my roar." The battle was a chaotic symphony of the boys'-style brutality and high fantasy scale. Unlike the monsters of Tempest, who were still recovering from their evolution, the Black Bulls were at the height of their power. They fought with a cynical, dirty pragmatism that the Holy Knights couldn't comprehend. When a knight tried to recite a prayer for a defensive ward, Zora Ideali's trap magic, placed hours ago in anticipation of a counterattack, erupted beneath their feet, doubling the force of their own spell and blowing them into the stratosphere. Yami Sukehiro walked toward Arno Baumann, the Cardinal's shadow. Arno drew a rapier made of pure light, his saint aura flaring with enough intensity to blind a normal human. "You are an aberration," Arno hissed. "A man who uses darkness to shield a demon. You will be purged from history." "Yeah, I get that a lot," Yami said, his hand slowly drawing his katana. The blade was pitch black, coated in Manaskin and dark magic, deep delivery. But here's the thing about history, pal. It's written by the people who are still standing, and I don't plan on lying down for a guy in a fancy dress. Arno lunged, his speed exceeding the limits of human perception. His light blade struck Yami's katana, and the collision sent a shockwave that leveled the surrounding forest for half a mile. Light and shadow clashed in a violent, grinding struggle. Arno used his unique skill Inquisitor, a power that allowed him to see the sins of his opponent and make his weapon heavier with every transgression. "Your soul is weighted with the deaths of hundreds," Arno shouted, his blade glowing brighter. "You cannot win against the weight of your own evil." "Heavy, huh?" Yami grinned, his muscles bulging as he pushed back. "Good. I like a challenge. If my sins are that heavy, then I'll just have to use them to crush you. Dark magic. Death thrust. The thrust wasn't a physical stab, it was a localized collapse of space. The darkness didn't just pierce Arno's light shield, it ignored it. The Cardinal's shadow barely managed to dodge, a chunk of his shoulder being erased from existence as the spell passed through him. In the sky, Asta was facing the final desperate gambit of the remaining mages. They had combined their lives into a suicide circle, a forbidden ritual that would detonate the local magicule density, turning the entire Jura forest into a crater. It was a scorched earth policy. If they couldn't purge the demon, they would burn the world he stood on. Asta! Rimuru shouted, his wisdom king, calculating the blast radius. Get out of there! You can't negate a blast that big. It's too much energy. Asta looked at the glowing circle, then down at the city of Tempest, where the goblins and lizardmen were looking up with fear. He thought of his mother, he thought of the Wizard King, and he thought of the ragtag group of losers who had become his family. I'm not getting out of here, Asta whispered, his eyes turning completely black. I'm moving forward. Anti-magic, black divider. The Demon Slayer sword grew. It didn't just get longer. It expanded into a gargantuan, jagged pillar of black void that stretched for hundreds of feet. Asta gripped the hilt with both hands and swung it with every ounce of physical strength he had ever built through millions of push-ups and squats. The black blade met the white sun of the suicide spell. For a second, the world held its breath. Then, the blackness consumed the light. The explosion was swallowed whole, the energy being fed directly into Asta's swords, which hummed with a terrifying, low-frequency vibration. Asta plummeted from the sky, his armor shattered, his body smoking, but the city was untouched. He landed in the center of the plaza, carving a crater into the stone, and as he stood up, he coughed out a puff of black smoke. Is that all you got? Asta wheezed, pointing his sword at the remaining, terrified inquisitors. Arno Baumann looked at his shattered rapier, then at the smoking boy, then at the demon lord Rimuru, who was now standing behind the black bulls, his Beelzebub ready to finish the job. The saint realized that the church hadn't just failed. They had encountered a force that was fundamentally outside their jurisdiction. This isn't over, Arno whispered, though his hand was shaking. The Holy Empire of Lubelius will not forget this. Tell them whatever you want, Yami said, sheathing his sword. But if you come back, bring more guys. These ones were boring. The smoke of the battle with the Holy Inquisition didn't drift away. It was consumed. Rimuru Tempest, now standing fully as a true demon lord, raised a hand, and the very air in the Jura forest seemed to purify itself, drawing the residual miasma of the disintegration spell into his own stomach through the Beelzebub skill. The forest was scarred, the stone of the plaza was cracked, and the blood of both men and monsters stained the earth. But for the first time in days, the sense of impending doom had lifted. The Western Holy Church had been repelled not just by the power of a new god, but by the sheer, unpredictable violence of 14 outsiders who didn't know the meaning of the word impossible. The city of Tempest didn't return to celebration immediately. There was a solemnity to the recovery, a quiet recognition of the lines that had been crossed. The monsters who had been brought back to life walked with a new weight in their steps, their souls permanently marked by the gift of their master. But as the sun began to set, casting long, amber shadows over the capital, the sound of laughter began to echo from the central tavern, and it was led by the unmistakable, lung-shattering roar of Asta. "That was amazing!" Asta yelled, his face buried in a bowl of meat that Charmy had personally enhanced with local forest ingredients. "Those guys with the light swords were super fast. I think I grew at least 3 more muscles just trying to keep up with them." "You're already 90% muscle and 10% yelling, kid," Yami Sukahiro grunted, sitting at a long wooden table with Rimuru, Benimaru, and the newly summoned Diablo. Yami was on his 5th flagon of Tempest Brewed Ale, and for the first time since his arrival, he looked genuinely relaxed. "But I have to admit, this place has better entertainment than the Clover Kingdom. Back home, the nobles just sneer at you. Here, they try to delete your existence with a holy light show. It's a step up." Rimuru, leaning back in his chair, looked at the ragtag group of black bulls scattered throughout the tavern. Vanessa was teaching the goblin girls how to sew and drink, Luck was trying to convince a very reluctant Sue to spar again, and Noelle was attempting to maintain her royal dignity while Shion practically smothered her in a celebratory hug. "I have to ask, Yami," Rimuru said, his golden eyes reflecting the hearth fire. "Why did you guys stay? You don't have a stake in this world. You could have stayed in your castle and waited for the rift to reopen. Instead, you put yourselves in the crosshairs of the most powerful religion on the planet." Yami took a slow drag from his cigarette, the smoke curling around his head like a dark halo. He looked at Rimuru, not as a slime or a demon lord, but as a fellow leader who had been forced to shoulder the weight of 1,000 lives. "We're the Black Bulls, slime. We don't have a stake in anything except each other. In our world, people call us the worst squad because we don't follow the rules and we don't care about the greater good if it means stepping on the little guy. You built a home for people who didn't have one. That's a language we understand." "It's true," Noelle added, finally escaping Shion's grasp, her face flushed red. "It's not like I did it because I like you or anything, but as a member of the Silva royal family, I couldn't simply ignore such unrefined behavior from that church. Someone had to teach them a lesson in manners." Rimuru laughed, a genuine, light-hearted sound that seemed to ease the lingering tension in the room. "Well, your lesson has caused a bit of a diplomatic nightmare. The 7 days clergy are going to be furious, and the Western Holy Church will probably declare me a catastrophe-class threat by morning." "Let them," Diablo purred from the shadows, his eyes glowing with a dark, predatory affection for his master. "If they wish to test the limits of your new power, I shall be more than happy to facilitate their education. Although, I must admit, I find the young man with the black swords to be an unsettling variable. Even my perception of the world's laws seems to falter when he is near. That's because Asta is the ultimate no to people like you, Diablo," Rimuru explained. "He's the one thing in this world, and yours, that can't be calculated, and in the days to come, I think I'm going to need as many no's as I can get." The conversation shifted to the future. Rimuru revealed that he had received word of a Walpurgis, the banquet of the demon lords. His ascension had disturbed the balance of the octagram, and the other lords, specifically Clayman, were looking for any excuse to eliminate the new upstart. "Clayman is a puppet master," Rimuru said, his voice turning cold. "He uses others to do his dirty work. He thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, because he's playing a long game, but he's never met anyone like you lot. He's used to dealing with people who follow the system. He's not ready for a bunch of lunatics who break the system by accident." "A banquet of demon lords, huh?" Yami grinned, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. "Sounds like the kind of party where someone eventually gets thrown through a wall. Count us in." "I think this is a really nice way to just talk naturally together, talk plainly. Let's give it a shot." "I'm going too," Asta shouted, standing up so fast his chair flipped over. "I want to see if any of those demon lords want to join my workout routine. And if they're mean like the church guys, I'll take them down too." As the night deepened, Henry Legolant began to move the Black Bull hideout closer to the heart of the city, permanently integrating it into the skyline of the Jura-Tempest Federation. The castle, once a symbol of isolation and disgrace in the Clover Kingdom, was now a monument of alliance. The Special Foreign Legion of the Black Bulls had officially been formed. In the quiet moments before dawn, Rimuru stood on the balcony of his office, looking out over the city he had saved and then resurrected. He felt the Wisdom King Raphael processing millions of data points, calculating the wars to come, the political maneuvers, and the inevitable clashes with the Eastern Empire. But as he looked at the Black Bull Castle, a messy, loud, and defiant structure that stood against the orderly backdrop of his city, he felt something that no calculation could provide. He felt hope. He had become a demon lord to save his friends, but in doing so, he had invited a storm into his world. The Black Bulls were that storm. They were the anomaly that would ensure that no matter how many skills or laws were thrown at them, the Jura-Tempest Federation would never be just another piece on a chessboard. They were the wild cards, the glitch in the system, and the family that would help him redefine what it meant to be a monster. "Asta, Yami, Noelle," Rimuru whispered to the wind. "Let's see if we can't change this world together. Right here, right now." Conclusion. The arrival of the Black Bulls in the Jura-Tempest Federation fundamentally altered the trajectory of the Great Forest of Jura. Where Rimuru once stood as a singular pillar of power, he now possesses a vanguard that operates entirely outside the voice of the world. The kingdom of Falmouth's invasion was not just repelled, it was erased conceptually, leaving the Western Holy Church in a state of unprecedented theological crisis. The anti-magic of Asta has become the ultimate deterrent against the holy miracles of Lubelius, turning the Jura forest into a zone where the church's authority simply ceases to function. As Rimuru prepares for the Walpurgis, he does so with the knowledge that he is no longer just a newbie demon lord to be bullied by the likes of Clayman. He is the leader of a nation that houses the world's most dangerous paradox. The Black Bulls have found a home where their status as outcasts is a badge of honor, and their limit-surpassing philosophy has begun to infect the monsters of Tempest, creating a military force that defies traditional power scaling. The Octogram will soon learn that while a demon lord is terrifying, a squad of magic-nullifying lunatics with nothing to lose is a disaster that even the gods cannot predict.